Hello, Professor. This is my presentation or video for the essay for ASAM 7. I hope you like it. In Justin Chan's Blue Bayou 2021, the protagonist Antonio LeBlanc finds himself faced with the brutal realities of U.S. immigration enforcement. The life-disrupting destruction of family and livelihood achieved through rigidly enforced procedures, and the socioeconomic realities of citizens who find themselves caught in the complex web of immigration law and subsequent enforcement of these rules, whether in the United States or in Japan. This film argues that systemic injustices and deportation procedures, as exemplified in the life lived by Antonio, who has never undergone a trial nor had his poverty driven inability to purchase legal representation taken into consideration. Dehumanizingly erased of his identity, served to illustrate the injustice of societal exclusion based on the bureaucratic classification instead of human belonging and family security. My paper argues that Blue Bayou illustrates how American immigration laws enact structural violence, Galtung 1969, intersectional violence, Crenshaw 1989, and societal exclusion, Silver 1994, as Antonio stakes the life of his family on his attempt to remain with them, highlighting the compounding effects of poverty and the dehumanizing tag of the word illegal. In light of these defining criteria, the film critiques a policy that adheres to procedure at the expense of lives lived in the process, resulting in huge and unjustifiable loss of life, requiring prior resources and human values of belonging to be redefined to preclude human existence for a rival form of existence that can only be defined as a chicanery. Blue Bayou illustrates these systematic injustices issues through the unexpected deportation procedures affecting Antonio, where a number of factors beyond his control, the fact that he is a product of a Korean adoption into a U.S. family, the factor of illegal categorization in terms of immigration status, and further, a minor criminal record owing to the factor of youthful desperation, unravel in the face of due process. ICE agents and officers strictly follow procedures in deportation activities without regard for the facts of Antonio's life, the result being that he is detained through no fault of his own, and yet the complete arbitrariness and justice of Galtung's 1969 structural violence is enhanced as a result of indirect harm wrought through the enforcement of entrenched institutions that seek to normalize destructions of family life. There is no trial, as immigration force takes place outside the criminal courts that treat Antonio as a removable alien rather than a rights bearing resident. As depicted in the dramatic rapid sequences in which procedural protocol overrides all claims for mercy, Antonio's poverty and his record exacerbates the exploitivity, vulnerable position into which he has been placed, hindering access to a good legal defense. Since he cannot afford to pay for a private attorney, he is thrown back upon the overworked public systems, which conform to Crenshaw's 1989 intersectional analysis, in which class, race, Korean Americans, and immigration status sorry, and immigration status coverage to enhance marginalization. Wealthier adoptees, wealthier adoptees may keep their cases from being removed and appeal, but Antonio's caught in the trap of economic impotence, exacerbated by his periodic tattoo, artists, gigs, and the necessities of family. The American Civil Liberties Union 2022 confirms this further by stating that low income immigrants have a 50% greater chance of being deported, being deprived to a greater degree of representation before courts can even do anything. Chan's film reflects this by indicating how following procedure gives a maleficent excuse to enforcers of the evil, enacting injustice. As Antonio adopted, American self crumbled under the weight of administrative indifference. Family sacrifice and cost of deportation, the film concerns itself mainly with Antonio's agonizing sacrifices in a deportation threat, in which to remain means losing home, nest egg, and family on which depends his savings and security, giving like definition. His family, wife Kathleen, pregnant, and stepdaughter Jessie. Deportation does not obviously mean merely exile, but totally obliteration of family components. It means the enforcement of ICE while facing forfeiture of those financially invested in the home and those confronted with pecuniary disaster. The depiction in Antonio's case in a pure instance of societal exclusion theory, Silver, 1994, in which physical isolation from communities imposed by enforced policy obliterates ties to familial elements and resources, and in which mixed status families become collateral damage or victims of political action. Let me scroll down. In Blue Bayou, Antonio weighs the consequences of resisting to fit in with the possibility of raids, of losing the modest home where they live and its limited resources for the significant, wasted cost of exhausting all the forms of appeal. Through family meals and Jesse's attachment, Chan accurately represents the emotional toll of the family structure, but all family members and the deportation and movement for life only accentuate their triviality. Oh my God. Triviality. As the Migration Policy Institute 2023 states, over 5 million mixed status families come to endure these risky situations of gaining annual separation from their loves, those dearest to them, and expenditure of more than footing upwards of $1,000 in expenses incurred through offenses and employment at loss. The sacrifices of Antonio through borrowing of money, hiding himself from patrols, reveal the structural violence and the expectation that the undocumented will suffer each and all the excesses of the opportunity for structural violence, constituting the family unit as a resuscitative opportunity. For the part, nevertheless, of the term family unit in confinement, shortly becomes successful, placed as being a privilege only of the citizen and revealing each and all the policies, registering a value for procedures and legislative acts reflecting and commodifying belonging. A state of existence allowing entry and exclusion. Identity of itself that units belonging and his exclusion by state of whatever identity built by anti-historical existence built in non-identity can help further to illustrate the truth of them being of non-existence. Belonging as being in the context of state without the defense of identification by necessarily to be an illegal and being of performance of given identity, not of non-identity. And state's requirement of identification still does not that legume in its existence of anything of the term other than that. It feels of resuscitative salt on a wound when Antonio is deprived of belonging of individual family in whatever consequent circumstance as being an adoptee. The character, the characterization, the character, the characteristics of this stress are illustrated with what, without textual relevance, is whatever specific characteristic of the story and of the backdrop of the anti-hero whose existence and identity can equally lead to impoversion, impoversion, not to funnies, not of funnies, sorry. As stated, when beginning the family, unit reflected living lives of individual sectors, inducting terror and offending liability, causing disruptance in their individual sectors. It all comes mentioned as needing to be done out, not leaving off unpleasant consequences at disappearance in port formally. The workings of the historical sense of the child will expose itself in many sense of belonging, and even such things as the child whom it never can cease to induce, and this context to the black and white character and identity. The area and outside nature left unexplored. Each example of these systematic each example of these systemic tested examples help to realize identity can of necessity lead to bullying, and when the difference between city and agricultural viand almost and agriculture and farming fed feudalism and more, and then corrective exercises of all these as well as economic efficiency, and all preclude any antithesis.